we have our town engineer, for those who maybe been here at regular meetings, when we develop stuff, it's Len Recker. And he's gone ahead to help us out here, I hope. So let's let Len have the floor. And he's got some options that he's worked on, or there's discussions on how we can do this, and I think I'll just let you explain how we'll go from here, because you're a heck of a lot better speaker about this than I am.
All right.
So take it away, Len Recker.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming today. Again, my name is Len Recker. I've been the town engineer here for 25 years, helping the town with various development issues, what have you. Earlier this year, the town chairman and I were discussing some what I would characterize as persistent high water conditions on Lilly Lake. Obviously, anytime you have high water conditions, it can create problems for lake residents or other things in the community. And unfortunately, the lake's been closed to a lot of recreational activities that some of you want to do due to high water. High water can often cause damage to lakefront properties due to wave action and other things. It's pretty common for communities, lake districts in Wisconsin, to establish some level that establishes a slow no wake. Most communities do it by ordinance, and the ordinance means that this elevation is definitive, there's no arguing. It's been determined by the body of the lake district that that's the lake level that starts to cause problems for the residents of the lake. Lilly Lake, yes.
Have you made any assessment of the lake as to how much damage might be done and where?
Have not. I have not.
So nobody knows.
Let Len finish here, and then we'll go for
So
questions.
nobody knows.
Let Len finish here, and then we'll go for questions. Okay, thank you.
We'll get to that hopefully. The question always becomes on a lake like Lilly Lake, it's what we call a kettle lake. It's in a depression in the terrain, and as rainwater and other precipitation fills it up, be it groundwater, springs, what may have you, we allow Mother Nature to evaporate and keep the lake level in check. There is no natural outlet for this lake, and so we have to deal with rising lake levels and then dry conditions to allow the lake to recede back to what would be characterized as normal water. So this graph here, I think you each got in the newsletter, kind of represents the 8-year history of some of the fluctuations of lake level as monitored by one of your volunteers. I'm not sure if they're here who does the lake readings, but very good data. There's many readings that are taken throughout the various years to monitor where is the lake level. And that data, when you put it on a chart, has a long-term average of right around elevation 757. That's kind of the median here. So elevation 757 is what just statistically the average lake level has been, at least in the last 8 years. Whether it was significantly different decades ago, I don't know that. I don't know that we have that lake level information dating back to the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, what have you. So the average level of the lake is around 757. When the town and the Lake District did the boat ramp a few years ago, the DNR has what they call a regulatory level that they use for permitting and regulating activities in and around the lake. They established what's called an ordinary high water mark. That ordinary high water mark, according to the Wisconsin DNR, is 0.8 above your average elevation of 757. So 757.8 is a regulatory level that the DNR considers ordinary high. When they mean ordinary high, they say in any given period of time, the lake could fluctuate, and on average, they consider that to be generally high water conditions. That doesn't mean that that has any bearing on what the Lake District decides should be a level for slow no wake. They're independent of each other. So if you look at just the last 8 years, obviously in the summer of 2012, we had a very dry year, and we had recorded a lake elevation that was 755.7. So considerably below the long-term average of 757. And then just 5 years later, in July of 2017, when the region had almost biblical rains, I'll call it, obviously we recorded a high mark on the lake of 759.12. So in 5 years, we had 3.4 feet of fluctuation in that lake, from a drought year to a wet year. When we get to 2019, obviously we had a heck of a wet spring and persistent rains that caused the water level in Lilly Lake to get pretty close to those historic highs, somewhere in the upper 758 plus type of readings, close to 759. I think back in May, the town, Lake District decided to establish a slow no wake for the good of the lake. I've worked with a lot of lake districts. I know one thing is you can ask any two neighbors and they have vastly different opinions about what lake life should be or what is considered high water. People say, geez, the waves that come in from the various activities on the lake, you know, they smash my flower garden, they do this because of high water. I get all that, and I understand that everyone's going to have a different view of what lake living's all about. Some people like solitude and just canoeing out there. Other people like to recreate and maybe have a wakeboard boat or a ski boat or whatever it may be, causes wave action, what have you. So that's a little history of how the lake has fluctuated, let's say in the last decade, based on the data that's been provided. If there's more data that goes back further, maybe that graph looks different, I don't know, but at least that's what we have near term here. So with that in mind, one of the concepts, and it's a concept at this time, I don't care if anyone does anything, to be honest with you, but the town chair asked me, well, could something be done that would afford the lake residents a mechanism so that if the water got as high as it is today, there'd be a slow drawdown mechanism that would allow it to recede to a level that's acceptable. And when we say a level that's acceptable, typically that's something above the ordinary high water mark from a regulatory standpoint, because the DNR, if you say, well, we want to drop the lake level to here because that's what they feel, they're going to resist us significantly on that, because in their opinion, we should try to find a device that at a minimum maintains the ordinary and probably close to the ordinary high. Right now, the lake's somewhere up in here. It's well above the ordinary high from a regulatory standpoint. So if conceptually, you wanted to devise a mechanism that would allow, during high periods of a lot of rain, when the lake level comes up, it slowly draws down to a level and then stays there. And so that's the concepts that are presented in these two options, is say, what can we do to put in what we call a fixed weir so that when water got to, let's say, elevation 758.9, just above here, below what it is today, we would allow gravity to take over and either drain out to the south, near the southeast part of the lake, or another option would be drain to the west toward Palmer Creek. Both concepts would effectively do the same thing. If you had a lot of rain, the water would stay high for a week or so and drain down to some level and then stay there. Can't get out any further because you're putting a fixed weir in there, and it would do a couple of things. It would probably diminish significantly the amount of time that a slow no wake had to be in effect, if at all. If we got another 8-inch rain, water's going to be high until it can drain down. But the drain down period is some period of time, usually takes a week or so, to slowly drain into some water downstream. When we look at a project like that, and eventually should it be the sentiment of the district that, yes, we'd like to find something that controls our lake level, well, there's a permitting process through the DNR. They look at, Palmer Creek is actually listed as a trout stream. So their concerns are some of the warm waters coming off Lilly Lake during high water going to Palmer Creek, does that detrimentally affect trout habitat, things like that. So they look at all kinds of things like that. They look at the volume of release. Generally speaking, we look at a slow release, so we're not dumping it all that way at one time. Same thing to the south. The south option would eventually go south, and then it bends to the east and eventually gets to the Fox River. The Fox River is an impaired water. That water body basically can pretty much accept anything you throw at it. I would contend the Lilly Lake waters are probably a little better quality than what's in the Fox River. So, you got that going for you. So those are two conceptual options. Should it be the sentiment of the district that we'd like to find a way to control lake levels during really wet years. Now during a dry year, it doesn't do a darn thing. It just sits there, Anytime you develop a option like this, there's some basic maintenance. You may have to clean weeds and other things off near the weir so it doesn't get clogged and it can allow it to flow out. Those are routine things that most lake districts or communities can readily do. So, you know, I guess those are the two options that the town chairman has asked us to at least preliminarily look at. Where we go from here is, you know, if there is sentiment of the Lake District body that we want to proceed and at least study this a little further, let's look at the feasibility and the cost of the west option. Let's look at the feasibility and the cost of the south option. Come back in a report and say, here's what two options would be, here's the challenges, here's approximate cost. Then you need to decide, does anyone want to spend the money building this? You know, just to give a very preliminary magnitude of cost, I think the south option's somewhere in the $125,000, $150,000 range. This west option's probably around $250,000, maybe $300,000 at the outs. Very preliminary, haven't put a lot of time into it other than to establish that there is a way to allow gravity to take care of high water conditions. Some, I think, have asked, well, why can't we just pump it out? Well, pumping has another whole set of challenges to it as well. Similar, where's the receiving water? When are you going to pump? You need some really big pumps to pump down 80 acres. It takes a long time. You know, it involves a lot of mechanical apparatus, and it's something that most communities do not opt for unless it's some dire emergency to protect property and life in some cases. And so, in general, there's some aerial map, there's a contour map. You know, this route here, about 3 foot lower than the intake here. This one here is about, same thing, 2 feet lower than here. Both would work. You know, I know there's some history that some of you have brought to the attention of the town over time. The question is, was there ever a natural outlet here? Did it eventually flow into the street? Wait, did I hear something? Yeah. So, with that in mind, there is a natural swale here, and at one time, was there a culvert there? The town repaved 80th Street, I think about 8 or 10 years ago. At that time, we did do some exploratory work to look for an old culvert in there, be it rotted, be it whatever. We did not find one.
Because it was taken out when they did it. That's right.
When they did what?
When they did the new.
When they did the road?
Yes.
No, it wasn't, because we were there the whole time. That contractor never once took a culvert from out there, so it wasn't a contractor. If somebody did it independently or in the middle of the night.
How about before that?
Yeah, 1976.
When was the first time they did that?
That I don't know, but that's good information, and that's why you're here today, because if there was evidence of a culvert here at one time, and we can find that that culvert was taken out, that makes the regulatory process with the agencies that much easier.
There was another culvert in there where the cows used to go through to get to the other side.
The cows went under the road?
Under the road, they went through.
Okay. That's good information. That's good information. So whether it's the south route and reestablishing a natural overflow at the south route or a west route, either way, there's some work would have to be done to reestablish that and allow that overflow to occur. Yes?
Is there any examples that we can go see if somebody's doing this? If somebody's have the system in there in place, you know, locally or?
Sure. There's several lakes in the region that have something similar to this. A lot of lakes rely on a dam, which is a regulated structure where they're changing it every year. A lot of times in the fall, they'll draw the lake down. This would not be a dam. It would just be a high water overflow. We can find some examples of that and get that passed on to the Lake District.
The idea of going to the west,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to somebody from the DNR and they told me there's no way they're going to allow any water to go in there. So has that been explored at all? And also the cost is going to be at least double.
Correct. So we did send this information to Marty Johnson, the DNR. He never responded to the inquiry, but they realize as an agency that, you know, we'll look at anything. Obviously, there are concerns, as I indicated, with the habitat of the Palmer Creek option. The option to the south, from a water quality standpoint, is probably a better option, is probably a lower cost option as well. However, this is all private property here, and you would have to negotiate an easement for that work in there.
Is the gentleman from that corner property here?
No, in the south here, south option.
That house should have never been built.
The culvert was put there so the water.
Hey, we're not here to talk about what house got built or
Well,
anything.
that's the problem.
Here, this is not what this is about, that house being built on that side of the lake.
Let's solve the problem. We have a problem.
It was
It's all about DNR permits and the county zoning and everything else.
The only thing I'm saying is, the house is there, we're not gonna sit talking about it.
Right, it's there, and it was all done with permits and everything else. so.
Bill, I understand it.
Yeah, they had permits, how did they get it?
My point is, I had talked to this gentleman,
No,
and I thought he'd be happy with having the drainage ditch there. Didn't you tell me that? Would you mind that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm
That's our problem.
no, that's that.
Thank you.
But there's properties in the swamp that are owned too, right?
By Kenosha County.
They own the whole swamp? I thought some of the people that back up on J I ran into.
Well, they own the discharge parcel immediately downstream of a culvert.
So Dean
underneath.
is the only one that the property, that would be affected.
Right, the private property owner to develop the drainage swale is the gentleman back here.
And there is an
He's already
easement there.
he's.
There is an easement on that property.
It's a 30-foot easement.
Okay,
It's on the plat, so.
okay.
Wasn't that all swampland before that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you look,
That's who owned that property before the house was built, and no disrespect to the homeowner now. I'd like to know who owned that property while it was a swampland, before the house ever even became there. Who owned that property?
Dead.
And on the drive and.
They're both dead.
On the property.
So where did it change from a swampland to buildable property? And
When the lake was down.
unfortunately, it clearly looks like the house is kind of low up
Yeah.
to the water. So I have no idea how that didn't get built up. If they allowed a building permit to be allowed there, or a house to be built there, how did the house not get at least raised before, elevation raised? I question why there's no elevation charts here. Is there, I'm sorry?
yeah, there's contours over here.
Okay, because, I mean, even when the lake is low, that property has always been a swampland. So when the lake did come high, that was the overflow.
Right.
And now that we don't have that opportunity, which obviously means the lake comes up.
But
So-
can I say one thing is that the other factor besides the house are all these new houses being built and all that water flowing in, so a house is there.
Right.
We can rip down the house and then talk about the house, are we gonna solve this problem? I think we should solve this problem. We have a problem, let's solve it. Not let's talk about history. We know the history.
And respectfully, where I was going with that is I don't understand how there wasn't a better easement and that was engineered into that property. I'm fine with the house being built there, that's terrific. But for the life of me, I can't understand why they did not create a culvert or a swell there for this exact problem. I think that everybody in this room is going to agree that when that structure was allowed to be built there, we were going to have this day sooner or later come.
And
We knew that.
houses that are damn called, the big houses, they will be.
We have a dam called the road without a culvert.
Right, and that's the part. Something to fall on their shoulders, not on our tax basis.
When you guys speak, just say your name for the record.
Eric Kister, 33011 76th Street.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, okay, on the house, okay, there's a few questions here. The house, at the time that we built the house, it has been built up, way up. The lake effect does not affect the house. It might affect a little bit the basement, maybe at some point in the future, but not at this point. The water, at the time we purchased the house, the property, the flooding area, or the area that you could consider that it was not as normal as it should be, it was probably exactly where it is now. Now, whether some people remember flooding, etc., I don't know. But when we purchased the property was owned by a previous owner, ready to build. We purchased it with permits, just in case anybody disputes that. And DNR was involved, and city was involved, and all the permit agencies. Nobody said anything. Nobody said no. So there's some gentleman who likes to blow his mouth off here and say
The property was highly modified.
it was not.
It was modified.
Well, then you prove it.
I got, you know what?
He's
Well,
a
then
neighbor of ours.
then you should prove it.
Everyone.
Because if you prove it.
I have pictures of you backfilling a lot. Remember my father said you cannot backfill a lot. We saved the pictures, we have them at home. We even took them out of the safety deposit box just for you. I fully understand. They lied to you. They should have never allowed you to build it. That's not your fault. That's everybody else's fault who allowed you to build on a swamp.
Yeah.
Get this back on track. Okay, let's talk, wait a minute, I still have the floor, I understand. I understand I still have.
Yeah, it's open for discussion.
Okay.
Correct.
Do I have the floor?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. She's talking about backfilling the lot. The lot was filled way in from the lake, from the high water line. And it was increased in height probably by 4 inches.
4 inches?
4 inches. So I don't know what you are talking about. I don't know where you get your facts. So I know one thing. House was built high. House was built, purchased properly with money. It was not handed down. And finally, whatever was done with permits, 100%. Any insinuation that there was any monkey business can find me in court. Any insinuation, any one word can find that person in court. So I release the.
I don't, you know what, I don't think. Planner or what, Chuck?